Commander Zexthara had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations across 3 galactic spirals. Her crystalline carapace bore the scars of 1,000 battles. Each mark a testament to her understanding of warfare's brutal mathematics. As the supreme military strategist of the Veltar hegemony, she had orchestrated campaigns that reduced entire star systems to cosmic dust. War, to her, was an elegant equation of resources, positioning, and inevitable outcomes. The holographic display before her showed the latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories. A new species had emerged from a backwater system called Sol, calling themselves humans. The data scrolled past in familiar patterns: bipedal, carbon-based, short-lived, technologically primitive. Their vessels were crude amalgamations of metal and combustible fuel, their weapons laughably inefficient compared to Veltar plasma arrays. Another insect species, Zewixthera muttered, her translator converting the thought into the common galactic tongue. Her aide, Subcommander Renth, nodded agreement while organizing the tactical assessments. The humans had made contact with the Galactic Council 3 cycles ago, presenting themselves as peaceful explorers seeking knowledge and trade. Standard protocol for emerging civilizations. What wasn't standard was their rapid expansion into contested territories along the Veltar border. Intelligence suggested they were completely unaware of the political implications of their movements. Zewixthera studied the humans' military specifications with professional detachment. Their largest warship, something called a dreadnought, measured barely 800 meters in length. The Veltar's smallest patrol corvettes were twice that size. Human weapons relied on kinetic projectiles and primitive nuclear warheads. Their soldiers wore bulky environmental suits and carried chemical propellant firearms. Subcommander Zewixthera said, her 4 arms manipulating the holographic controls with practiced efficiency. Compile a standard intimidation package. These humans need to understand the hierarchy of galactic civilization. The intimidation package was a time-tested diplomatic tool, a demonstration of overwhelming force designed to bring emerging species into line without the messiness of actual warfare. The Veltar would position a battle fleet at the edge of human space, destroy a few uninhabited asteroids with planet-cracking weapons, and wait for the inevitable surrender. 3 days later, Zewixthera found herself aboard the flagship Inevitable Conquest, watching as her fleet of 200 vessels emerged from hyperspace at the coordinates designated as Proxima Centauri. The human colony there was small, perhaps 50,000 inhabitants according to their public broadcasts. Begin the demonstration, Zewixthera ordered. The Inevitable Conquest's primary cannon charged with a sound like reality tearing. The weapon could vaporize a small moon, and Zewixthera had selected an appropriately sized asteroid for the display. The energy beam lanced out, striking the target with perfect precision. Nothing happened. Zewixthera's secondary brain clusters fired error signals as she processed the impossible sight. The asteroid remained intact, unmarked by the weapon that should have reduced it to its component atoms. Her tactical officer frantically ran diagnostics while the bridge crew struggled to understand the failure. Commander, the tactical officer reported, voice tight with confusion. The asteroid is artificial. It's a human defensive platform disguised as a natural body. The revelation triggered a cascade of realizations. If the humans had successfully camouflaged military installations as asteroids, what else had they hidden? Zewixthera's perfect intelligence picture began crumbling as her sensors detected energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Human vessels approaching, announced the sensor operator. Configuration unknown. The ships that emerged from behind Proxima Centauri's stellar radiation didn't match any of the designs in the Veltar database. These vessels were sleek, organic-looking constructs that seemed to flow rather than fly. Their hulls shifted color like living skin, and they moved with an unpredictability that defied tactical prediction algorithms. Open a communication channel, Zewixthera commanded. The human who appeared on screen looked unremarkable by the standards of galactic species diversity. Pink-toned skin, small eyes, minimal visible weaponry. But something in the human's expression made ZYXTRA's combat instincts flare with warning signals she couldn't identify. "I'm Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Fleet," the figure said in accented but clear galactic standard. "You're trespassing in human territorial space and have committed an act of aggression against our infrastructure. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." ZYXTRA felt a tremor of something she hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The human spoke with casual confidence despite being outnumbered 400 to 1. Either they were magnificently ignorant or they knew something she didn't. "I am Commander ZYXTRA of the Veltar Hegemony," she replied, falling back on standard intimidation protocols. "Your species is new to galactic civilization and clearly doesn't understand the established order. We are here to provide education. Surrender your colonial operations and submit to hegemony authority, or we will demonstrate why resistance is futile." Admiral Chin smiled, and ZYXTRA realized she was looking an expression she'd never seen before in centuries of conflict. It wasn't the desperate bravado of outmatched defenders or the cold calculation of experienced warriors. It was something else entirely, something that made her combat algorithms struggle for classification. "Commander," Chin said, "I don't think you understand what you're dealing with. Humanity didn't expand into space because we were explorers seeking knowledge. We expanded because our homeworld became too small to contain our conflicts. Every human ship out here, every colony we've established, represents the surplus population of a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other." The transmission shifted, showing images that made ZYXTRA's understanding of primitive human warfare evaporate. Massive explosions that could be seen from orbit, cities reduced to radioactive craters, battlefields stretching beyond visual horizons covered in the debris of destroyed war machines. The humans had somehow managed to conduct planetary-scale warfare using their supposedly primitive technology. "Every human you see," Chun continued, "grew up learning about Gettysburg, Stalingrad, Normandy, Baghdad, the Siege of Terra, the Martian Independence Wars. We don't just study warfare, Commander. We dream about it. We write poetry about it. We turn our greatest killers into legends and teach their tactics to our children." ZYXTRA's tactical computer began running probability calculations based on this new data, and the results were deeply disturbing. If the humans had been conducting continuous warfare for millennia, their military experience base would be vastly deeper than any other known species. "You want a demonstration of force?" Admiral Chin asked. "Very well." The human ships suddenly accelerated beyond what their engine's signature suggested was possible. ZYXTRA realized with growing alarm that she'd been deceived about their technological capabilities. The humans had somehow masked their true potential, presenting a facade of primitiveness while concealing advanced capabilities. The lead human vessel fired a single projectile at the disguised defensive platform. ZYXTRA expected to see the kinetic weapons she'd read about in the intelligence reports. Instead, the projectile seemed to phase through normal space-time, striking the asteroid fortress and causing it to simply cease existing. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but deleted from reality as if it had never been there. "That was a demonstration shot," Chen said calmly. "Our actual warheads are considerably more aggressive. Now, would you like to discuss this like civilized beings, or shall we continue with tactical demonstrations?" ZYXTRA felt her worldview restructuring itself around this impossible revelation. The humans weren't primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. They were a warrior species that had been deliberately concealing their capabilities, allowing others to underestimate them while they studied their potential opponents. "Stand down, weapons," she ordered her fleet, knowing with centuries of tactical experience that she was facing an enemy she didn't understand. "Maintain defensive posture." The human ships had surrounded her fleet while she'd been focused on the impossible weapon demonstration. 200 Veltar vessels, each one a masterpiece of military engineering, had been outmaneuvered by 40 human ships that had appeared from locations her sensors insisted were empty space. Wise choice, Admiral Chen said. Now, let's discuss why the Veltar hegemony thought it was acceptable to threaten human civilians. As the communication channel remained open, Zhuangxia found herself in a position she'd never experienced before, negotiating from a stance of tactical disadvantage against an opponent who had completely subverted her understanding of the strategic situation. The humans, she was beginning to realize, had been studying galactic military doctrine while presenting themselves as harmless primitives. Every public diplomatic contact had been an intelligence-gathering operation. Every peaceful trade negotiation had been an opportunity to assess potential threats and plan countermeasures. Commander, Subcommander Renth whispered, "Our long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. Whatever they showed us here, it's apparently just a fraction of their actual capabilities." Zhuangxia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. She had made a fundamental error, one that violated every principle of military intelligence. She had assumed that surface appearances reflected true capabilities. The humans hadn't been hiding because they were weak. They'd been hiding because they were predators, and predators understood the value of camouflage. While the galaxy had been dismissing them as primitive newcomers, they'd been studying everyone else's weaknesses and preparing for the inevitable conflicts that their experience told them would come. Admiral Chun leaned forward on the communication screen, and Zhuangxia realized she was looking at something she'd never encountered in a lifetime of warfare, a member of a species that genuinely enjoyed the intellectual challenge of combat. "You know what the difference is between humanity and every other species we've encountered?" Chen asked. "Everyone else treats war like it's an unfortunate necessity, something to be ended as quickly as possible. Humans treat war like it's the most complex game ever invented. We've been playing it for so long that we've forgotten how to do anything else exceptionally well." The implications of that statement reverberated through Zhuangxia's strategic thinking. A species that had evolved beyond seeing warfare as a means to an end, instead treating it as an art form to be perfected, would approach conflicts in ways that no standard tactical doctrine could predict. "What do you want?" Zhuangxia asked, abandoning her intimidation posture entirely. "Want?" Chun smiled again, and this time Zhuangxia recognized the expression. It was the look of someone who had been waiting for a worthy opponent to finally reveal themselves. "We want to understand why the Veltar hegemony believes it has the authority to threaten human colonies. And, depending on that answer, we want to determine whether the hegemony represents a legitimate security concern that requires mitigation." The word mitigation carried implications that made Zhuangxia's combat instincts scream warnings. She was beginning to understand that this conversation wasn't a negotiation. It was an interrogation, conducted by a species that had apparently been preparing for galactic warfare since before they'd even left their homeworld. As she prepared to respond, Zhuangxia realized that everything she thought she knew about warfare was about to be challenged by a species that had turned conflict into a science, an art, and apparently a form of entertainment. The humans weren't primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. They were apex predators who had been studying the galaxy's military capabilities while carefully concealing their own. And now they were ready to demonstrate why a species that had spent millennia perfecting warfare was not something the galaxy was prepared to handle. Subcommander Renth activated a private communication channel. "Commander, should I signal the fleet to prepare for tactical withdrawal?" Zhuangxia looked at the human ships surrounding her forces, their hulls shifting color and patterns that probably conveyed tactical information she couldn't decipher, and realized that withdrawal might not be an option they were going to be offered. "Negative," she replied quietly. "I think we're about to receive an education in why humans don't make threats. They make promises." Admiral Chen's ship had materialized alongside the inevitable conquest with a precision that defied every principle of physics Zhuangxia understood. One moment her flagship had been surrounded by the dark vacuum of space. The next moment, a human vessel of impossible design was matching their velocity exactly, its hull a mere 100 meters from her bridge. "We'll continue this discussion aboard your ship," Chun had announced. "I find that difficult conversations are best held in person." Now, Zagthara found herself in her own strategy room, watching as Admiral Chun examined the holographic displays that showed the disposition of Veltar forces throughout the galaxy. The human moved with casual confidence through what should have been an alien environment, occasionally pausing to study tactical readouts with an expression of professional interest. "Impressive deployment pattern," Chun observed, gesturing at a display showing hegemony battle groups positioned along 3 major trade routes. "Classic defensive posture with rapid response capability. Your strategists understand the fundamentals of territorial control." The casual evaluation made Zagthara realize she was being assessed by someone who viewed her lifetime of military achievement as merely competent rather than exceptional. It was a humbling experience that she found deeply disturbing. "How did your ships achieve translocation without engaging hyperspace engines?" Zagthara asked, attempting to regain some measure of control over the situation. Chun smiled that unnerving human expression again. "Translocation? Is that what you call it?" She activated her personal communication device, and the air around them shimmered with holographic interfaces that displayed information in scripts Zagthara couldn't read. "We call it tactical positioning. Our ships don't travel through hyperspace, Commander. They manipulate local space-time to achieve positional advantage." The implications of that technology were staggering. If humans could move their vessels instantly to any location within a combat zone, every principle of fleet engagement became obsolete. Range, positioning, tactical formation, all meaningless against an enemy that could appear anywhere at will. "Your intelligence reports suggested our technology was primitive," Chun continued, scrolling through data that appeared to be Veltar tactical assessments of human capabilities. "Chemical rockets, kinetic weapons, nuclear fission bombs. All quite accurate, as far as they went. But not complete," Zagthara said, beginning to understand the scope of the deception. "Oh, they were completely accurate," Chun replied. "We do use all of those technologies. They're just not the only technologies we use. You see, humans learned a long time ago that enemies make assumptions based on what they can observe. So we make sure they observe exactly what we want them to see." Chun activated another holographic display, this one showing what appeared to be human military doctrine. Zagthara found herself looking at strategic principles that bore no resemblance to anything in galactic civilization's understanding of warfare. "Deception is the fundamental principle of human military thinking," Chun explained. "Every engagement, from individual combat to strategic campaigns, begins with convincing your opponent that you're something other than what you actually are. Weaker, stronger, more aggressive, more passive, whatever serves the tactical situation." The display showed historical examples that made Zagthara's tactical computers struggle to process the information. Human armies that had defeated numerically superior forces by convincing their enemies to attack fortified positions that didn't exist. Naval battles where entire fleets had been destroyed by opponents they never saw. Planetary invasions that succeeded because the defenders had been deceived about the location and timing of the assault. "But this was just warfare between human factions," Zagthara protested. "Surely you can't apply these principles to galactic-scale conflicts involving entirely different species." "Can't we?" Chun asked. "Commander, what did your intelligence services tell you about human psychology?" Zagthara accessed her memory files, reviewing the standard xenobiological reports. "Highly social species with strong territorial instincts, capable of cooperation but prone to factional conflicts. Relatively short lifespan leads to impulsive decision-making. Limited cognitive flexibility due to rigid neural architecture." "All completely wrong," Chun said cheerfully. "Though I suppose that's understandable, since every piece of information your intelligence services gathered came from humans who were specifically instructed to present exactly that profile." The revelation that humanity's first contact protocols had been an elaborate intelligence operation designed to deceive the galactic community struck ZYX like a physical blow. Everything the hegemony knew about human psychology, culture, and capabilities had been carefully crafted misinformation. For instance, Chun continued, humans aren't prone to factional conflicts because we're impulsive. We engage in factional conflicts because we're bored. A species that has solved the basic problems of survival and resource distribution needs more complex challenges to maintain psychological health. Warfare provides that stimulation. Chun manipulated the holographic displays to show what appeared to be human colony worlds. Instead of the struggling agricultural settlements described in intelligence reports, ZYX saw massive industrial complexes and defensive installations that could rival anything in hegemony space. Every human colony is a fortress, Chun explained. Every civilian is a trained combatant. Every trade vessel is a potential warship. We've been preparing for galactic warfare since the day we discovered that we weren't alone in the universe. But why? ZYX asked. If your species has achieved the technological advancement to disguise entire star systems, why present yourselves as primitives? Why not claim your place among the galactic powers? Chun paused in her manipulation of the displays and fixed ZYX with a look that carried centuries of accumulated tactical wisdom. Because we learned something important during our expansion into space, Commander. Every galactic civilization we studied made the same fundamental error in their military thinking, which was they all believed that warfare was about resources, territory, or political dominance. They treated it as a means to achieve some other goal. Chen's expression shifted to something that might have been pity. Humans learned long ago that warfare is its own goal. The most perfect form of competition, the ultimate test of cognitive and technological capabilities. The human admiral activated a new display that showed galactic military capabilities in a format ZYX had never seen before. Instead of the standard assessments of fleet strength and territorial control, this analysis evaluated each civilization's military doctrine from a perspective that was purely focused on the intellectual challenge of defeat. The Veltar hegemony, Chen said, highlighting the relevant data, employs a classical combined arms approach with emphasis on overwhelming firepower and positional advantage. Effective against most galactic civilizations, but predictable in its implementation. Your strategies follow logical patterns that can be analyzed and countered. The Zephyrian Republic relies on numerical superiority and accepts heavy casualties to achieve objectives. The Crystalline Confederacy uses advanced shielding technology, but has poor mobility. The Hive clusters coordinate through quantum entanglement, but become vulnerable when their communication nodes are disrupted. Each analysis was accompanied by tactical scenarios showing how human forces would engage and defeat the various galactic powers. The scenarios weren't theoretical. They were detailed battle plans backed by intelligence assessments that demonstrated intimate knowledge of each civilization's military capabilities and weaknesses. You've been planning to attack everyone, Alixthara said, feeling a chill that penetrated her carapace. Attack. Chen looked genuinely surprised. Commander, you're thinking about this wrong. We're not planning to attack anyone. We're preparing to defend ourselves against everyone. She manipulated the display to show human defensive arrangements throughout their territory. What ZYX had assumed were simple colonial outposts revealed themselves as nodes in a defensive network that could coordinate responses across multiple star systems simultaneously. Humans have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. We've been preparing for war against every galactic civilization since first contact. Not because we want to fight, but because we know that eventually someone will decide that humanity represents a threat that needs to be eliminated. The logic was unassailable, but its implications were terrifying. If humanity had been preparing for defensive warfare against the entire galaxy, their military capabilities would be designed to counter every known tactical doctrine simultaneously. Your species' approach to the Proxima Centauri colony was the first overt act of aggression against human territory, Chun continued, which means we've transitioned from preparation phase to active defense protocols. What does that mean? Zawixthra asked, though she suspected she didn't want to hear the answer. It means that humanity is no longer operating under the assumption that peaceful coexistence with galactic civilization is possible. Every human military unit in space has been authorized to engage in preemptive defense operations. Shin activated a new display that showed real-time positions of human vessels throughout the galaxy. Zawixthra stared in horror at the scope of human military deployment. They weren't concentrated in human territory. They were positioned near every major galactic installation, every fleet base, every strategic resource site. How long have your forces been in position? Zawixthra whispered. Since about 6 months after first contact, Chun replied casually. We needed time to complete our intelligence assessment and position our assets appropriately. Every major galactic civilization currently has human observation posts monitoring their military capabilities in real time. The revelation that humanity had successfully infiltrated surveillance equipment throughout galactic civilization without detection suggested a level of technological sophistication that made the Veltar's own capabilities seem primitive by comparison. Commander, Chen said, her tone becoming more serious, I want you to understand something important. Humanity doesn't want to fight the galaxy. We'd prefer to continue our deception, expand our territory gradually, and avoid the massive disruption that galactic warfare would cause. But you will fight if necessary, Zawixthra said. Oh, absolutely. And we'll win, because we've been preparing for this specific scenario for decades while everyone else has been assuming that humans are just another primitive species struggling to establish ourselves among the galactic powers. Chun manipulated the tactical display to show projected casualty rates for various galactic civilizations in the event of open warfare with humanity. The numbers were staggering. Complete military defeat within cycles for most governments. Total societal collapse for civilizations that couldn't adapt quickly enough to human tactical innovations. The question, Chun said, is whether the Veltar hegemony wants to be part of the solution or part of the problem. What kind of solution? Zawixthra asked. A new galactic order where humanity takes its appropriate place among the major powers and everyone else adjusts their territorial ambitions accordingly. Peaceful coexistence based on mutual respect for defensive capabilities rather than the current system of intimidation and resource competition. Zawixthra studied the human admiral, trying to process the implications of everything she'd learned. Humanity wasn't offering negotiation. They were offering capitulation disguised as diplomacy. Accept human dominance willingly or face military subjugation. And if we refuse? Chen's expression shifted back to that unsettling smile. Then, you'll discover what warfare looks like when practiced by a species that considers it the highest form of art. The communication device on Chen's uniform chimed softly, and she glanced at the incoming message. Ah, that's convenient. It appears that 3 Veltar battle groups have just entered human space near our Tau Ceti installations. I assume they're part of your backup force in case this negotiation didn't proceed as planned. Zawixthra felt her primary and secondary hearts skip synchronized beats. She hadn't authorized any fleet movements, which meant the hegemony's automated defense protocols had activated in response to her failure to report and on schedule. That's unfortunate, Chen said, studying the tactical information on her device. Those crews are about to receive a very educational demonstration of why humans don't issue warnings before defending their territory. You can call them off, Zawixthra said quickly. One word from me, and they'll withdraw. I'm afraid it's too late for that, Chen replied, showing her the display. Human defense platforms in the Tau Ceti system detected your ships 17 minutes ago. They've been classified as hostile forces engaged in unprovoked invasion. The response has already been authorized. On the screen, Zawixthra watched as 3 of the hegemony's finest battle groups simply ceased to exist. No explosions, no debris fields, no energy signatures. 600 of the galaxy's most advanced warships had been deleted from reality as cleanly as erasing text from a datapad. "What did you do to them?" she whispered. "Standard defensive protocol," Chen replied. "When faced with superior numbers, eliminate the threat before it can coordinate an effective attack. Your ships were transported to a pocket dimension where they'll remain until we decide what to do with them." Pocket dimension? Artificially created space-time bubble isolated from normal reality. Very useful for removing unwanted objects from tactical situations without the messy cleanup that traditional weapons require. Zhuangzi realized she was looking at technology that made every galactic civilization's understanding of physics seem like primitive superstition. Humans hadn't just mastered space-time manipulation. They'd turned it into a routine military tool. "The crews are unharmed," Chen assured her, though they're probably quite confused about their current situation. "The question is whether you'd like to join them, or whether you'd prefer to return to hegemony space with a new understanding of humanity's place in galactic civilization." As Zhuangzi contemplated her options, she realized that her earlier assessment had been fundamentally correct. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an education. And the lesson was that everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare was about to be rewritten by a species that had been perfecting the art of conflict for millennia before they'd even discovered that other intelligent life existed. 6 months after the incident at Proxima Centauri, Zhuangzi stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council, her crystalline carapace bearing new scars that had nothing to do with physical combat. The psychological weight of what she had learned about humanity had fundamentally altered her understanding of her place in the universe. The Grand Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from 47 civilizations debated how to respond to humanity's revelation. The humans had not announced their capabilities publicly. They hadn't needed to. Word had spread through intelligence networks as each major power discovered that their most secure military installations had been under human observation for years. "The evidence is undeniable," Zhuangzi announced to the assembly, her voice carrying across the vast chamber through translation matrices that converted her words into dozens of languages. "Humanity possesses military capabilities that exceed our current understanding of technological possibility. They have been conducting comprehensive intelligence operations against every galactic civilization since first contact." Representative Thekvar of the Crystalline Confederacy rose from his geometric throne, his mineral body reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns of agitation. "You speak of impossible technologies, Commander Zhuangzi. Pocket dimensions, instantaneous transportation, reality manipulation weapons. These claims sound like primitive mythology rather than tactical assessment." Zhuangzi activated the holographic projectors, filling the chamber's center with recordings she had been authorized to share. The assembly watched in stunned silence as 600 Veltar warships vanished from existence without trace, replaced by empty space where moments before had been the pride of the hegemony's battle fleet. "This footage has been verified by our best technical analysts," she continued. "The humans didn't destroy those vessels. They moved them to what they call a pocket dimension, an artificially created space-time bubble where they remain intact, but completely removed from our reality." The recordings shifted to show human installations throughout the galaxy, facilities that had been disguised as everything from asteroid mining operations to merchant vessels. Each revelation demonstrated the scope of humanity's deception and the sophistication of their intelligence network. Every major civilization represented in this chamber has been under human surveillance, Zhuangzi announced. "They know the location of our fleet bases, the specifications of our weapons, the details of our military doctrine. They have been preparing for galactic warfare while we believe them to be primitive newcomers struggling to establish basic colonies." Ambassador Kelnoth of the Hive Clusters spoke through the quantum resonance that served as their communication method, their collective consciousness struggling to process individual concepts of deception. "If humans possess such overwhelming advantages, why have they not simply conquered the galaxy? What do they gain from this elaborate charade? The question had haunted Zhuangzi for months, and she had finally received an answer during her extended negotiations with Admiral Chun. According to their military leadership, humans consider unprovoked conquest to be intellectually unsatisfying. They prefer their conflicts to be challenging, with opponents who understand the stakes and can provide meaningful resistance. The implications of that statement created a wave of disturbed murmurs throughout the assembly. A species that possessed the capability to conquer the galaxy, but chose not to because it would be too easy, represented a form of thinking that no other civilization could comprehend. They want us to fight back, declared Supreme General Vorth of the Zephyrian Republic, his scarred battle armor gleaming under the chamber's lights. These humans are treating galactic civilization like some kind of game, waiting for us to provide them with entertaining opposition. It's more complex than that, Zhuangzi replied, accessing the psychological profiles that human negotiators had eventually shared. Humans evolved on a planet where survival required constant conflict with their environment, with competing species, and ultimately with each other. Warfare became their primary method of problem solving, but also their primary form of intellectual stimulation. She displayed human historical records that showed the progression of their military technology from crude weapons to reality-manipulating devices. Every innovation had been driven by the need to gain advantage over other human factions in increasingly sophisticated conflicts. When they discovered galactic civilization, they realized they had found the ultimate test of their capabilities. Not just individual battles or planetary campaigns, but the challenge of outmaneuvering dozens of different species with entirely different approaches to warfare. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed the revelation that humanity viewed galactic politics as the most complex strategic game ever encountered. They weren't seeking resources or territory. They were seeking worthy opponents who could challenge their tactical abilities. "What do they want from us?" asked diplomat Serenhai of the Ethereal Communion, her energy form flickering with patterns of anxiety. "Officially, they want peaceful coexistence with appropriate respect for human territorial integrity," Zhuangzi replied. "Unofficially, they want galactic civilization to become more interesting. They're bored by the current state of affairs where most conflicts are resolved through economic pressure and diplomatic maneuvering." The holographic displays shifted to show Admiral Chen's proposed reform of galactic civilization. Instead of the current system based on trade relationships and territorial agreements, humanity envisioned a more dynamic structure where political disputes would be resolved through what they call structured conflicts, limited warfare conducted according to agreed rules that would provide intellectual stimulation without causing excessive damage. "They want to turn galactic politics into a sport," General Vorth said, his voice containing a mixture of outrage and grudging admiration. "A very sophisticated sport," Zhuangzi confirmed, "with rules designed to ensure that victories are achieved through tactical innovation rather than simple resource advantage. They've proposed a system where territorial disputes would be resolved through military exercises, trade conflicts through strategic competitions, and diplomatic disagreements through what they term cognitive warfare." The final element of the human proposal appeared on the displays: a comprehensive restructuring of galactic military doctrine around the principles of continuous competitive conflict. Instead of maintaining standing armies for occasional territorial disputes, all civilizations would participate in ongoing strategic competitions that would serve as both diplomatic mechanism and intellectual entertainment. "And if we refuse," asked Representative Thekvar, "then humanity will consider galactic civilization to be a failed experiment and will implement their own preferred solution," Zhuangzi replied. "They've prepared what they call a galactic reform protocol that involves the systematic defeat of all existing governments and their replacement with human-administered territories." She displayed the operational plans that Admiral Chun had shared during their final negotiation session. Humanity had developed specific strategies for conquering each galactic civilization, taking into account their unique biological and technological characteristics. The plans were comprehensive, elegant, and terrifyingly effective. They've been studying us for years, Zawaxtara explained. Every diplomatic contact, every trade negotiation, every cultural exchange has been an intelligence-gathering operation. They know our weaknesses better than we know them ourselves. The chamber erupted in discussions as delegates struggled to comprehend the scope of humanity's strategic planning. They had been playing a game where only one side knew the rules, and that side had been preparing for victory since before the game had officially begun. Ambassador Kelnath's quantum resonance filled the chamber with harmonic patterns of deep consideration. You have negotiated with these humans extensively, Commander Zawaxtara. What is your assessment of their sincerity regarding peaceful coexistence? Zawaxtara considered the question carefully, remembering her months of interaction with Admiral Chun and the other human representatives she had encountered. They're completely sincere about their desire to avoid unnecessary destruction. But they're equally sincere about their intention to restructure galactic civilization according to their preferences. They see themselves as bringing order to a chaotic and inefficient system. Humans believe that the current galactic order is psychologically unhealthy for all involved, she continued. Too much stability, not enough challenge, insufficient motivation for technological and cultural development. They want to create a more dynamic system that will force all civilizations to continuously improve their capabilities. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't offering conquest or subjugation. They were offering evolution under pressure. A galactic civilization that would be constantly challenged to improve, with warfare as the mechanism for measuring progress and resolving disputes. The alternative, the Zawaxtara said, displaying the final element of her report, is comprehensive defeat followed by integration into human-administered territories. They've made it clear that they consider this option to be less satisfying, but entirely acceptable if galactic civilization proves unable to adapt to their preferred system. General Vorth activated his personal combat analysis systems, studying the human military capabilities that had been revealed during the Proxima Centauri incident. Can we defeat them through conventional military action? No, Zawaxtara replied without hesitation. Our combined fleets represent approximately 12 million combat vessels. Human intelligence assessments suggest they could neutralize our entire military capacity within cycles using technologies we don't understand and can't counter. Could we develop countermeasures given time? Possibly, but they've been observing our research and development efforts for years. Any countermeasures we develop will be anticipated and rendered ineffective before they can be deployed. The chamber fell into contemplative silence as the assembled representatives processed the reality of their situation. They were facing a species that had been preparing for this confrontation longer than some of their civilizations had been spacefaring, using technologies that seemed to violate fundamental principles of physics. There is one additional factor to consider, Zawaxtara said, displaying the final component of her intelligence assessment. Humans appear to be genuinely interested in creating a system that will be intellectually stimulating for all participants. They're not seeking to eliminate other civilizations or reduce them to slavery. They want worthy opponents who can provide ongoing challenges. She showed psychological profiles of human leadership that revealed a species genuinely committed to creating a more dynamic and interesting galactic order. They saw themselves as teachers rather than conquerors, though they were prepared to be very forceful teachers if necessary. The question, Zawaxtara concluded, is whether galactic civilization is willing to accept humanity's vision of a more competitive future, or whether we prefer to maintain the current system until humanity decides to replace it with something more to their liking. As the assembly began the complex process of determining galactic civilization's response to humanity's ultimatum, Zawaxtara reflected on her own transformation. 6 months ago, she had believed she understood warfare as a tool for achieving political objectives. Now she understood that she had been playing checkers while humanity had been perfecting multidimensional chess. The choice facing the galaxy was not between war and peace, but between controlled evolution and imposed transformation. Humanity had spent millennia learning that conflict was the most efficient method of driving innovation and progress. Now, they were offering to teach that lesson to the rest of the galaxy, whether the galaxy wanted to learn it or not. As the debates continued around her, the Waxeral realized that she was witnessing the end of one form of galactic civilization and the beginning of another. The age of diplomatic stability was over. The age of competitive evolution had begun, whether they were ready for it or not. Humanity had kept their promise to provide an education. The question now was whether the students would graduate or fail the course.